You're watching 2-on-1, the internet's top sensation, where two theologians engage one theologian about the pop culture topic of his, her, or their choosing. If it's time for 2-on-1, it means I am your co-host, the Reverend Arthur Stewart.
And I am your other co-host, the Reverend Detective Stephanie Candle, or Spiff.
Oh, that'd be fun. Reverend Detective. I think I want that title in real life now. Hi, Spiff. We're talking about Brooklyn Nine-Nine today, and inevitably, like the role and responsibility of policing in society. This should be a fun one for everybody involved.
Sure should.
But it's good. We're talking the NBC and then Fox comedy, the Andy Samberg vehicle. It's good, but the problem is I have a confession to make, Spiff.
Tell me.
I stole. That's not true. I have a stole from Jeff Wonroe Designs. Jeff Wonroe Designs has been spending the last 17 years making ordinary time extraordinary through their liturgical textiles. From stoles and chasubles to frontals, altar accessories, paraments, and even liturgically colored face masks. And of course, the odd cope or chasuble. Jeff Wonroe Designs has literally got you covered. Find out more about our sponsor, look at the entire catalog and customization options at JeffWonroe, JeffWunrow.com. It can Absolutely. Be done in 30 seconds. Just wanted to prove.
Oh, you did it. No, but I wanted to hop in there. As you all know, our deuces, our beloved fans, those that watch the show, listen to the show, and even if you're new, maybe you don't know, this is for you. Our deuces have the exact number one and only best deal out there on the internet. It is 15% off your entire stole order if you use 2-on-1-1-5. So all letters, all letters, then two numbers. So 2-on-1, that's spelled out. Then 1-5, 15 for the 15% off you're going to get when you order your stole. So 2-on-1, 15, use it at checkout to get 15% off your entire stole order. Tag us when you unbox, tag Jeff, let us know you're out there using it. I hear so many of you saying like, oh my gosh, the code worked. Look at my beautiful stoles, X, Y, and Z. Ordination season is coming up, all those things. Y'all get yourself a Jeff Wonroe stole.
Y'all get yourself a Jeff Wonroe stole. And this is just kind of cool, and you can do a googly search and an Amazon-ly search. If you look up, are you still watching, using pop culture to tune in, find God, and get renewed for another season, you will find that you are able to pre-order a book that Spiff and I have edited about pop culture and theology. It comes out from Chalice Press. We'd prefer it if you ordered through them because it's always good to support independent publishers. But pre-ordered it, get 2 copies. Get one from Chalice.
Get 11.
Yeah, get 11 copies. That's great.
Get all of, actually get 12, one for every month, because there are 12. We are not only the editors, we are also co-authors in this book. We have collaborated with so many of previous guests and guests that are upcoming. It is a true 2-on-1 collaboration with the Bethany Fellows and Chalice Press. And we are so excited. If y'all did not see it, it was featured, as we all know, in Publishers Weekly with the cover art. And if you go and look at it online right now, it's literally still the very first cover next to Pima Chodron's book. I mean, like, I feel like we're moving on up in publishing society there, my friend.
We are moving on up indeed. And if you order it from Chalice Press and use the code 12on51, but we're not going to tell you which numbers are letters and which letters are, I'm just kidding, but we'll work on Chalice to see if we can't give our deuces a code when it's time. So
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Jeff Wonroe. Thank you, Chalice Press, and thank you, deuces, for pre-ordering the shit out of our book.
Thank you, deuces, for good job. No, but really, we are thanking the deuces out there for who y'all are the only ones that made this possible. If none of you watched, if none of you listened, there would be no reason for Chalice to trust us with this work and this book. We would still do it because we enjoy doing it, but you know, the things that are being made possible through your support and your kindness and your love, and you know,
like you.
What? Deuces like you. Exactly. We're just really grateful. So yeah, there's that. Yeah,
that's a good way to put it. All right, well, we should probably bring in our guest she downstairs, because we're interviewing today the associate minister at Riverside, where I'm the senior pastor at Riverside. I have to open that back up and hit admit. We're glad to be joined by the Reverend Olivia See. All right, hi Olivia, welcome to 2-on-1. We're so glad you're here with us today.
Hi y'all, thanks for having me. I'm an associate minister with Arthur Stewart here in Wichita, Kansas at Riverside Christian Church. And so, yeah, hopefully our internet is strong enough for us to do this today.
Are you
can do all
ordained?
things through.
Am I ordained? I am recently ordained. I am, 9 days past ordination? Yeah. So it is official. I'm a minister.
Yeah, you are. That's so exciting.
It is.
Congratulations.
And
Thank
on
you.
Sunday, Olivia literally was like, "No, I'm not a Bible expert." I'm like,
Listen, it's fine. It's
They can-
ordination changes you, but it also just solidifies you.
Which that statement might come out today in this too. If you're asking me like, well, what from scripture? I was like, well, like that's just not the memory aspect.
One thing that tells us immediately that our guests have never watched our show is what they say. If you ask us, if you ask me about the Bible.
we didn't send Olivia a confirmation email, but we did. This is a long time coming. It just happened in of it. Olivia, you've got about 55 minutes to figure out what Bible story, scripture, verse, theme, character reminds you and informs you about Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Sweet.
All right.
I hope I can manage that.
And Spiff,
Time's a ticket.
being able to actually ask that question. All right, so we are doing Brooklyn Nine-Nine today, a comedy series that started on NBC and moved to Fox after a Save
Other way around.
from Fox to NBC.
Other way around.
At least on Hulu, when I have watched it since the beginning of the pandemic, it has always had the NBC logo through everything. So I couldn't tell you where it. So
Well, it started.
research that.
What?
It started on Fox.
It started on Fox, went to Hulu, or went to NBC.
Yeah, sweet.
But over 7 seasons, it follows the exploits of Jake Peralta, played by Andy Samberg. 8 seasons, sorry.
Yeah, there you go. That was right. I was looking at trust my finger.
For
8
those
seasons.
at home, Olivia very confidently held up 8 fingers, and then went down to 6, and then 7, and then 5, and then like 9, and then 8, just inverted on her hand.
They were switched on the screen. So there we go.
Follows Jake Peralta over 8 seasons as he goes from being a rookie detective to a more storied one. We are a spoiler show.
Also, this show's been done for a couple years, so
Yeah.
we are a spoiler show, but also it's not like last week when we were talking about Bridgerton that had ended the week before. So.
That's a little rough. Yeah.
That's all right. But Olivia, tell us a little bit about why, as our deuces know, our guests get to pick their show. Particularly because that way you get some invested interest in it. We're not trying to like force anything on you, but why do you like Brooklyn Nine-Nine? Why does it speak to you?
So I discovered Brooklyn Nine-Nine at the beginning of the pandemic, and I have probably watched it at least 3 times through since then. So in 2 years, if not 4. I watch it almost daily. I think what intrigued me or drew me in at first is one, the comedy, right? I think in the middle of the pandemic or beginning of the pandemic, to find something that you just relate with and have joy, pure joy. And then was just the initial, but yeah, I think the family aspect of it, I've yet to, like, the first show, I think for the most part that actually showed, so I worked in the corporate world for a few years, and like, I think it really does a really good job of, just relaying on the work-life relationships, right? Like you don't really actually know that much depth as much as you think you do. But like, as I was thinking about it today, I was like, really, like, some, but it is pretty like not surface level, but that's like how work relationships happen, right? And so I think there is that type of community that sometimes we kind of forget about, and we don't put as much value on. But when we actually sit back and look at how many hours a day of our life that we put towards work versus our family and friends, like we are with these people, especially in the corporate world and or like with Brooklyn Nine-Nine, when you're on a team like that, you spend more time with those people than you do anyone else. And so I just really, really appreciated the show and how they portrayed that aspect of it.
Love it. I'll name that I was not familiar or as familiar with it until Arthur was like, hey, this is what Olivia wants to watch. And I was like, cool, I will do my best to watch as many as I can, and I will be prepared. But I wasn't unfamiliar with it because as I think everyone knows I'm a big SNL person. So like Hamburg's been a part of like my comedy genre. I'm also a big Office person. So Sure is a big part of it. So I was like, I got the comedy right. I was like, oh, I am target audience. So it wasn't hard for me to buy in. But I really appreciated the way, as you just named, the way in which it spoke to that familial space that we do create outside. It's a real kind of chosen family type thing. And I think that phrasing and that kind of nuance happens often. We talk about it a lot in church. We talk about a lot in different spaces, but it's important to name that it also happens in these shows, in which I think there's an invitation for the viewer to also be a part of that family. And for me, that was one of the things I immediately got out of it, was like episode 1, like it very much was like, oh, I'm on this team. And I wonder if in just even kind of the first season, first time you watched it, if you felt that way, and if you feel maybe that way about church, or how church should be.
Yeah, for sure. I felt the same way. Like I'm one of those people, this is theology too, in a sense that I, for some reason, like I don't know all things of life, but I kind of have this sense that I've lived other lives. And so there's something about like the detectiveness. I'm like, I think I am one of them. And I don't know if that's just Hollywood being great, or if that is just something, another reason I was drawn to it. But oh, for sure, a few episodes in and you're just like, I want to be their best friend. Like I am one of them. Like my wife and I talk about these people as if they are in our life. Like we take in their, inside jokes, and now they're ours. And so, yeah, that's, I think, the beauty of Hollywood and what they're able to do for people in that sense too. But yeah, in relation to church and what it is and what it can be. Yeah, the family aspect, I think that there is a genuineness throughout all the seasons for sure. And it grows tremendously in how they relate with one another, and how they forgive one another, and how they're willing to kind of sacrifice. And I think that's part like cop wise, right? But I think just as a family, as a group of people, especially as Christians, I think we can actually probably learn a lot from Brooklyn Nine-Nine if you actually look at it in that way, of how they relate with one another and the diversity of them. Like they are the most diverse little like 8 people or 7 or however many it is. Like, and so to take that to it, I think church can be that and should be that. And definitely been a part of church groups and Christian life and people I've surrounded myself with that, yeah, you can definitely relate and have that diversity, but know that there's still that common, just that core of love and support and sacrifice that you'll do for anybody.
I mean, so with Rosa Diaz, played by Stephanie Beatriz.
Correct, yeah.
The big joke, and it's amazing watching the first few seasons of season 1 before they figured out who she was. So she talks like this, and she's distracted, and like suddenly she's like, I could give a damn about any of you. And it's
and her voice drops, and it's
right.
Yeah.
And she becomes like super intense, and she always has like a hunting knife, and okay, it works. It's way better than the, oh gosh, Jake, I don't know if we can go on a date yet. Stephanie Beatriz is Rosa Diaz. Rosa has a weird past, and they're never sure if she's lying. They're never sure if she actually was like trained as a Russian ballerina or anything else. And it doesn't change anything about it. Like they all still maintain this deep and meaningful friendship with her. But it's also very clear that like when she decides to actually reveal who she is and what she's doing, they'll accept her, and she's not ready. And I've often thought about Rosa in the church, because I think we want people to be like, my life's a mess, but I immediately want to change it so that I fit in with you. And that's not necessarily the case.
Rosa's amazing. And part of it's the growth too, right? I think there's a trust aspect. Like, so I think storyline too is like Jake and Rosa went to the academy together, and so they were beat cops, as anybody, like they seem really young in this. I don't really know the real life of how young you can be when you become a detective, but in the sense that I think they'll get to be a beat cop for a while, and so they've been together for all this time. And so I think it's still like by season 6 or 5 that she finally like just starts emitting little bits and pieces. But yeah, but they had that bond before then, right? But I think that growth too, that commitment to community and letting people be themselves without pressuring to take more, and knowing that as you continue to grow and live life together, like people do become more trustworthy. and all that aspect of it too. So yeah, Rosa is a great character and that example of community and how you work with one another.
Well, it's showing up day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, and getting renewed for another season.
There you go. Well, and I really related to like episode 1. So I started with the pilot because I'm always a big fan of starting at that beginning, but also I think pilots are always meant to set you up like right at the beginning. And when I restart a show, or even if I start a show, like I make sure that I kind of pay attention. I have a habit of like whatever's on TV is kind of like in the background of whatever else I'm also doing. But if I'm watching a pilot, I watch it. And I've often thought like we need to re-show the pilot episode of church more often than we do, because it reminds us who we are, why we come in, what the backstory is, what the buy-in is, over and over, so that we forget that sometimes we use insider language that isn't inclusive. And and as I watched the pilot episode this time, and they get the new CO, and he comes in, he's like, I want everyone to wear a tie, and Jake's like, I got my tie around me, and he's not, like he's goofing off with Andy and all that, and then at the very end they're supposed to be getting this guy, and he's like, I get it, it's a uniform, we're a team. And it was a weird like preaching moment where those preachers that like drop the eggs at the end, and at the very end of service you get the people that come to and like, I get it now. Which I think there's something valuable to letting people get to it on their own, but also so often if they don't get it, we don't explain it. And so I think pilot episodes really do that in a cool way. And so I was just like, oh, what is the pilot episode for the church? So what is I'm curious, what is and I imagine there's probably several, like, as it's your own pilot episode, the pilot episode of like the community you may be serving, but like, I don't know, what's that pilot episode for you in your community maybe that you think that they need to see or re-experience?
Yeah, I really like that, because I think it is true. And I think for myself, as I've been in church ministry now, 15 months, maybe, no, 16, I don't know, somewhere around there, not long, right? So in church ministry, like, so I started here at Riverside, before that campus ministry and stuff, but so the amount of preaching I do, it's more often and stuff, and almost now every time I have to sit down to write, there is a moment almost every time I write a sermon, I'm like, why are we doing this every week? Like, it's the same thing, like I don't know what else to tell you, and so yeah, I think that aspect of it's kind of the basics, right? But I do think I like that idea of the pilot, like, who are we, whose are we, and just that reminder, right? And that reminder of what is our purpose. I think sometimes I think it's human nature to dig in, and I know probably for all three of us too, as theologians, like, we want to philosophically and theologically break things down, and then we get too detailed into all this stuff. But yeah, I think bringing it back for that reminder. And I think in the DOC tradition, I know, like with Arthur and I would see maybe a little glimpse of our pilot episodes every week at the communion table, right? Because I think that's the one place that we can actually, I think we simplify it there, like it's almost weekly. We don't go into a big ordeal of a meditation, but it's bringing it back in of saying, like, this is who we are. This isn't ours. This is God's, and so I do think maybe that's in that mindset. But I do, just that simplicity aspect of it, I think, is really cool. But I like that idea. Somebody who loves TV and movies, to frame it in that way.
Boy, do I have a book for you. Now, no, I was this past week, everyone knows I broke my leg last week. And so, and I'm also just like a type A Enneagram 3. Like I like to accomplish things. I like to see things through. And I broke my leg on a Thursday, and I was supposed to preach that Sunday. And I had done some exegetical work, like, for sure, but like my sermon just wasn't there. And I was in too much pain to do a sermon that I couldn't guarantee didn't do harm. Just working through my own pain. And so I called the other colleague that I work with, who's our other pastor, was on vacation, and she, like, bothering her on vacation was not going to solve anything, so it's like, let her be. So I turned to my elders and my deacons, and we just did a bunch of prayers instead of a sermon. And it drove me crazy because I felt like I was letting my team down. But as I've reflected on it, it's been like, no, I'm letting other gifts of my team shine and come up. And I was really moved by that, and just kind of like once it was all done. like I had to and I hate that I had to break my leg in order to see and remind myself that the pilot episode is where we get to know a little bit about everyone, even if primary seasons or primary episodes are focused on one person over another. And so last Sunday for my church was a real kind of pilot episode in which it was like, don't worry about the servant. We had community, God was present, we prayed, we sang, and we were there.
That's awesome.
It felt really nice. I don't know, Arthur, what about you? What's your pilot episode?
I would say the pilot episode is Acts, when they're still figuring stuff out. I mean, and I mean, it's I remember at Bright, I was scandalized the day that somebody said Paul was not the only apostle, right? Because I came into Bright like knowing nothing about scripture. And I was just like, oh, Paul's the one who codified it. And they all had like meetings and all said the same thing. And then it's like, nope, this is Christianity's when there's not Christianity. So we get Peter struggling with eating with Gentiles, and we get Paul working on a collection because he's positive that supporting the poor will help. And we get Thecla, and we get Junius, and we get all of these early stories before Constantine gets his dirty hands on it and they switch networks to Empire TV. Actually, that brings in another question and a challenge, I think. So the show's tone did not change when they moved networks. Like there was not, I thought they would lose cast, or they would lose set, or they would lose like just the weirdness of it. And it seems like they just completely shifted networks, and I've never seen that before in television. How does, as we're entering year 3 of this never-ending pandemic, we've all shifted networks, so to speak. How does the church survive this? What have we lost, and what do we have to hold on to?
Ooh. Olivia?
By the way, Olivia, I have a tradition on this show of asking like really big questions with no warning that don't necessarily have an answer.
Oh, I found a bell too. I was like, I got a bell that I was gonna ring every time we do, like, we need like little like things that, like ding 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 or something.
Like a warning.
Yeah, or like when I just start rambling and like I finally get there, but whatever. If you don't have an answer, I think I have an answer.
Well, I naturally was gonna say cool, because that is what I do in moments. I take that from Brooklyn Nine-Nine into my life. So that would be my answer right now. Of like, give me some time. So just go for it.
Yeah, no. What I think it reminds us why it doesn't change, why the tenor and the tone and all of that don't actually change, and why we still recognize the characters, the theme, the story arcs on a different network, is because they know who they are. And they know the root of who they are. And if we as church or church leaders know the root of who we are, which is a call through the gospel of Jesus Christ to serve and lead faith communities, regardless of where they are in presence, like physical presence or even spiritual presence sometimes, that if we have that root, we know who we are, you're going to be able to recognize the story. You're going to be able to recognize the themes, like all that is happening, regardless of if we're at the park or Riverside or wherever you go. I know my community and I come in, but if I were to come preach in your community, you're still going to know the same characters. You're still going to see it. It may feel just a little different because there's, like with any season and a new writer and whatever, but you're going to know it because there is a shared belief and experience in the knowledge of who we are. It's like, oh yeah, I'm not coming in using, some other text. I'm like, no, this is the Bible now. Have a good time. I hope you understand it. It's like, no, we've got similar scripts. We've got similar source information and understandings. And while we may interpret it differently and share it differently, it's still a recognizable show because we're all part of that same core understanding of who we are.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And something that came in my mind too, right? Why a network they sold them. It has to do with money too, right? So then I think that's a fascinating potential aspect to your question, Arthur, of like, they think about too as they did transition. It's not just the writers and the characters staying in it, but what does it mean when you literally get dropped? Like there's a big part there that I think comes into theologically and all that stuff when we're not pleasing or haven't checked all the right boxes for certain groups and stuff. And
Totally. And I think that we saw this really faithfully during the pandemic, or I hope we did. For those of us that went online fully. So this coming Sunday is my church's very first Sunday back since March 2020.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Finally. Do you actually haven't been back in person since we've started doing this?
I have not been in person since we started doing this, and I'm very nervous because I haven't really been around people a whole lot. Again, also broken leg, so there's that. And I'm preaching, and it's Palm Sunday. It starts Holy Week, and so I could not be more excited to see my people. I'm also terrified, and that's okay. I can hold those things in tension, but I think what Arthur had named earlier, and I think it speaks also to Arthur's like pilot episode that he wants to see, and what we're talking about is that like when we were online, right? The online church was not the vision of church that any of us had in our hearts or in our minds. It wasn't even part of our calls I don't think, when we're talking about call stories or in ordination interviews, right? All of that. And yet nothing can separate us, right? There's that real Romans 8 kind of like, we did the thing. We're still doing the thing. My church, having not seen each other in physical person in 2 years, is still worshiping God, is still loving each other, is still communing together because we know who we are and that core still sticks. So we have definitely changed networks. Like we went from the Upper East Side of Park Avenue to a fully digital global community. And in some ways, one is so much more expansive than the other. And there's a bigger reach. And what is the goal? And in another, we're incarnate people, and there is something to being together. And so our hope is that we do both of those faithfully moving forward. What is the Fox NBC hybrid? I'm not entirely sure. But maybe it's Nickelodeon. But it's that, right? That we recognize the show regardless of the network, because we have built a foundation of trust and truth based on shared values and interests, namely the gospel.
I like that a lot. And I'm sorry for those of you who are listening, I've turned off my video camera because I am a magical lag machine today. But it is good to talk about pilot episodes. And of course, too, the question might be, what do you do? So the final season of the show. Nope, not before we get to the final season. I want to talk about Madeline Wunsch.
Okay.
So Captain Holt is one of the best characters in postmodern fiction because he's just he becomes a caricature from being like, I'm very serious, to like, I think cottage cheese is too spicy. And it's this lovely almost organic development, but it's insane. And he has a rivalry with this white straight woman named Madeline Wunsch, and she is usually just ahead of him on the hierarchy, and they just say the worst things in the world to each other, where it's, I understand you've enslaved new Winkies to march in front of your house, Madeline, or whatever. Like, so she just inexplicably dies in the course of the show, and Holt doesn't know how to grieve it. And I remember when I watched it, I'm sorry, that's a spoiler thing, and I do love that he made balloon arches to take to her grave every day. He also thinks balloon arches are the height of decor. He doesn't know how to grieve it because it's almost like she's not dead. It wasn't a death that occurred on screen. It wasn't a death because the actress playing Madeline Wunsch quit or was unavailable. She just died. And there was an interesting thing about grief, and I remember thinking about it, is this because, and it was right after the show was resurrected and continued. How do we facilitate grief in the post-Easter, pre-resurrection world for a church that is dying? And I mean an institution. Like, let me rephrase, there will always be a church. But the 1960s model of congregational church is ending, it seems.
I mean, if we're people of the resurrection, I think you don't get to Easter without a Good Friday. So I think we are called into that reflective space of grief and community in order to be fully experienced in the resurrection. And so like when people say the church is dying, I don't care. I really don't. but that's strict. And again, we're meaning the institution of church, because I believe in a resurrected Christ, because I believe in something so much bigger than any of that, my favorite stories of Jesus, of God, are always the ones in which they grow and learn with us. Jesus calling the woman a slur and then being like, oh my gosh, I am so sorry, I was wrong, let's do better together. Or God being like, I killed all the people, my bad, like I'm gonna not do that again, right? Like that's a God that grows and grieves and understands and sits with us in that depth. I don't think we're meant to subvert it for the sake of our own comfort. And so I think that, shows that do that well, especially shows in which, characters that die kind of unexpectedly, especially the ones that you don't entirely love, like they're not generally people's favorite character. I think it offers us a really beautiful model of grief being a part of the human experience that we are created to engage. And that you can feel deeply for someone you actually don't particularly care about. One of the nicest things, and this is going to sound kind of odd, but shout out to John Pickle, who's an editor in LA, who I love Pickle. But like we had worked together for maybe 7 years at this point, and kind of peripheral. I was a producer, he was an editor. And I was dating this guy, and I was just like happy, like early relationship. It was like, ugh. And we were out at a bar one night because someone's going away party. And so we're all just kind of throwing him back. And he pulls me aside and then kind of gets me in a headlock. And like in just kind of like a little sister way, but we're colleagues. And he turns to me and he goes, like, I don't really care about you, but I'm really glad you're happy. And I thought it was honestly the nicest thing anyone has ever said to me, because the people that love me, I know they love me, and I know they like when I'm happy. It's the people that I'm just kind of in peripheral relationship, kind of just superficially. He's not someone I'm going to call or text. I haven't talked to him since I left. We follow each other on social media, but like, I'm glad he's happy. And like, he had enough, I don't know, like he just told me that. And that has honestly stuck with me for so long that it is, to this day, I think might be the nicest thing anyone has ever said to me.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. Because I think that's with the death of her. You hit it there, Spiff, of like, it's the death of somebody he really doesn't like, but he does, right? And so I think that's within the church too, as we talk about the church, the institutional church dying. I think there is a part of a lot of people who are grieving a death that they love, and it's that comfort. But I think there's a lot who, and maybe even for myself, when I think about it, when you say it, right, like it doesn't bother me much because I do believe in more than the building. I think we are called to so much more than that. But there's still that grief though to it, because it's like, what's going to happen without it? Because you're so connected, right? So that's with like Holt and all the names, it's hard for, but with her, right, like they were so connected. And so it's that thing of like, you just still don't want to see it die, like what do you do without it, right? But then to still be able to grieve and move on and see the good and the beauty of what life still has. And so I think maybe that's also with the church for the folks too who look at the institutional church and go, I don't actually like it, it's one of those, I think it's okay to die. I think it probably needs to, but at the same time, I know for myself, there's still that grief of like, what's going to happen though? Like there's that fear of the unknown aspect too. We trust in the gospel of what's to come. But I think I don't know, I think it's a pretty good question, Arthur, on that sense of thinking about grief of things that we don't quite fully support necessarily sometimes, but we know that we're fully connected and that there is still a love there, right? I think there's still love, even when the joy and like of being around the people or the thing isn't always there.
Well, and I think I think we could talk about this the whole time. There's just three other aspects. No, not three, two more that I want to talk about. I'm sorry. I love Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I love talking to Olivia. I literally have to just say to Olivia, like, I really do have work to do. We need to wrap this up. An hour later, we'll conclude things. And Olivia, if I'm not talking to you, I'm usually talking to Spiff, which is why I have nothing done for Monday, Thursday. But
Our bad.
So part of the relational aspect is a father and son dynamic and what it means to be brothers. Charles Boyle and Jake have the weirdest relationship in the world. because it honestly reminds me way too much of me and Jamie Plunkett, a friend of the show, Jamie Plunkett.
Shout out Jamie Plunkett.
Yeah, and he's Jake Peralta and I'm Charles Boyle. And I've told Jamie before, if we would have met in college, we would be enemies, not friends. And I'm glad we didn't meet in college. It's but the father and son thing. So I don't know if you saw any of these episodes, Spiff. Bradley Whitford plays Jake Peralta's horrible dad, like irredeemably awful father. And
I didn't, but Bradley Whitford.
Right. And also shout out to Jamie Plunkett again. And it's so jarring after the West Wing to see that. When we talk about relationships in the church, right? Like you talk about big brother, little sister headlock thing. When we talk about familial relationships, I've had to tell every church I've ever served, I have a mother. There's a reason why she doesn't live with me. Please stop trying to mother me. Also, fun side note, my mom may be moving in.
Hey
mom. But it is that, right? Like I don't need a surrogate mother. I have one. So let's try to define the relationship.
Well, so in that same, if I was to add into that too, Holt and Jake, I don't know if you're going to get that father son, but like, yeah, like as I think ministers too sometimes, right? Jake like accidentally throughout the whole, it's like, oh, dad, captain, dad. I mean, I didn't say dad, and it's so, yeah. I'll let you continue on, Arthur. But
no, and I mean that's the whole thing.
So
like the Holt relationship, Jake assigns it.
Correct.
Like he's like, you're going to be my mentor. You're my acting father. Like there you go. I don't know where the line is for congregations, right? Of like, I'm going to name the relationship I want, and I hope you'll live into it. I don't know.
Well, and one of the things, speaking of relationships, and I think that this, I'm going to kind of pull off of that a little. Like, what do we do with the relationship? So, scripture tells us, like, you can't kind of be a prophet in your own home, right? You can't and it really just means like you can't go and be, you can't be as effective in places if they can't let go of the person that you were into the person that you are or becoming. And for me, so I episode 1, because again, y'all, I did not watch a whole lot of this, but like I feel like I'm holding my own in this conversation because I feel like I know what I'm talking. Like I watched enough of it. But Joel Atrelia, who plays Charles, is in My Beloved Wet Hot American Summer as Neil. So as I watch, and I know Andy, because Andy is SNL, and like there's another story in which I physically one time ran smack into his back at a party, and I literally was like, oh my God, Andy Samberg. But Neil for me is a part of a different cast of characters that I hold so deeply, that are my friends, that I watch in times of deep joy and sorrow for the last literal 20 years, when it's been out for 20 years, what I has. And so I had to, like, he could not be a cop in my mind for the first couple of minutes. Like I had to let go of what was for him to allow what is to be. And that was really hard for me for a minute. And I kept myself like being like, where's Victor? Like, why is he not in here? And I'm curious if that's a little bit in what we're kind of touching on, is like, how do we allow these relationships to be what they are, father, son, even though they aren't father, son, they have their own, they have their own fathers, and some have their own sons and whatnot. But how do we move forward knowing that the tethers of old relationships continue to follow us, and yet don't need to be the thing that always draws us in or draws us back?
Yeah, and I think it's boundaries. I think with all those different situations of relationships, right? Because I think with Holt and Jake, I actually just never thought about it before in the sense of congregations and ministers. But I think even in boundaries, Holt does a great job with Jake of like, I think by the season 8, he's like, you can call me dad, like they finally get to that point or whatever. But for all those, he makes sure to put that boundary. He's like, I'm your captain, like we're not like, yes, there are similar things that I care about you and that I want you. And so I think within the congregations too, especially, and the boundaries also with, even me coming back home to Wichita, like I'm not in my home church by any means. But yeah, there's that thing of, I had to like take that scripture too. I'm like, no, but it's the people more so than just like home. Right. And, but the boundaries, I think that we are held to, I think sometimes also like be held to a higher standard to make sure that we put those in place so we can respect that. But then I think even those boundaries allow for new relationships to happen, a different type of relationship to happen, and being able to remind ourselves of what we're looking for in each other when we are in community with people. Because as we all know, not every single person you're going to meet is going to become your best friend, the person who's going to be carrying you to Jesus. Like that's just, it's not going to happen, right? But every single person we meet are children of God, and as we have a relationship with them, we can just figure out and see how are we going to be able to, in the end, bring the kingdom of God together with each other in different ways. So,
Absolutely. Shoot, we didn't get to talk about Kevin Costner. We didn't get to talk about like the stupidity of bureaucracy. The final season of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Jake struggles with internal affairs because he sees cops that act poorly, he reports it, and nothing happens because the police union is so strong. And John C. McGinley, no, that's not his name. Dr. Cox from
Scrubs.
Yeah, John C. McGinley. He plays a union rep who honestly reminds me of Dan Riorda out of St. Louis, because that guy is a walking piece of challenge, because slander is a real thing. Or libel. I don't want to do
He's
either.
a challenging human.
Yes, he is. He's a challenging human, and I hope Jesus loves him.
That's why we're in community. Someone will love all the people that we don't have to.
Right. And we didn't really get to talk about Halloween heists and a whole lot of
Doug Judy. Judy.
Let's talk about Doug Judy for 1 second, please.
That's who so if you want to talk about scripture, right? As this, what you guys do.
This is your final
I hear you're a Bible professor. You're well versed in knowledge of Bible. I'd love to hear what you have to say about this.
So when I say like I'm not a Bible expert, I'm not gonna be able to tell you like book and chapter and verse. Like, do I remember like what the gospel is? Yes, but I know those things. But the rest of it,
you're gonna need to put on an Americat t-shirt and go to town.
But Doug Judy, right? So like I know from what I understand and have heard of you guys' podcast that one, it's like, is there a Jesus character? One, and like at first when I was thinking about the folks and our characters, I was like, there isn't one, right? Because Captain Holt can't be that. But Jake, the more I think about Jake and Doug Judy, Jake, I would say maybe isn't Jesus, but is a disciple. Jake is the one who has that the call of his heart to care and see. So Doug Judy is this notorious Pontiac Bandit is his nickname, right? And so it's Jake's nemesis. He's a criminal. Jake's been going after him for years. And he keeps getting away. Well, they become best friends. Like the moment like they enter the same room together and just have a conversation, Jake like has to remind himself like, oh, I'm on this side of the table and you are on that, right? And so Jake to me with Doug Judy is just the epitome of who we are as we are called to take care of the people on the fringes and take care of the oppressed and take care of the people who are the other, because he's the perfect example in that whole entire series of the other and how Jake is supposed to not be okay. And Jake even like with Rosa at one point, they have like an inside joke of like 1,000 push-ups, like trust me, like I got this, and like it's screwed over and then Rosa has to trust him. And so there's just all this growth of community and seeing people for more than what their actions are sometimes. So I love Doug Judy. Doug Judy and the Pontiac Bandit with Jake, I feel like is one of the most disciple aspect, being like Jesus, that show has to offer, in my opinion, of just Jake being able to see past and see who the person is behind everything.
Yeah, I love that. And well, one thing that we didn't touch about, right, is that this show does kind of, in a way, what Schitt's Creek does is it creates a world that is better than where we actually live, right? These are cops that don't lean into their racist tendencies, or not, like they work out their, systemic issues with each other. They are queer, they are accepting, they are supportive. We know that is like looking at them. If that is your only understanding of American police force, you have a woeful misunderstanding of what is happening in systemic racism in the police structures in America. like, and all of that. So like it's held in nuance to say like, here are the ways in which you can be community. It's done through a system which historically is oppressive to almost every single one of the people that play in their squad room, with their exception of a couple of like the straight white dudes. And so it both offers a bit of hope and a bit of farce to say like this would just absolutely never happen. And so it allows you that space to say this is still funny, and this still has something to teach us as relational people and humans, without having to say that this is any sort of real connective version of the American police. So not to like turn it all down, but like I just feel like we would not do ourselves justice on the show if we did not at least caveat this with like we're not like gung-ho about the same way we did with
and so for you, I hope you finished watching season 8. It's all that is true, right? Because I do love that. I always have this mindset too of like, if aliens came and watched anything we do, so as much as I love sports, right? Like I have to always step back also and be like, if an alien came down, I was like, what are you guys doing, right? Like, what is this? Sports are the weirdest thing to the outsider. But with the show too, right? Like if no one knew anything about and they saw it, there would be this. But season 8, it was after a lot of our systematic racism issues, police brutality, all this stuff happened. And so they went on to season 8, and it was every episode is so intentional about all these things. And so it was really cool.
They like rewrote season 8 after George Floyd. Like they stopped production. Correct. and got educated and rewrote it. So
that's so go ahead.
Well, yeah, it's beautiful. Like that makes me love the show even more, is that these writers and these characters and and everybody was actively in that and willing to take a stand, and it is a stand, right? And as we know, these are human beings who are being paid but they have a right and they have a choice to what they're saying, even on TV, that they're being paid to say, and so there is this activist way that this show at the end for their season 8 very much made a statement about each one of these people as individuals, as real human beings, not just characters, and what they are standing up for and trying to own their own, I would say, washing over, right, as they've done for 7 seasons. They never talk about all those hard issues, and so season 8 they definitely took a lot of that on, which was pretty amazing. And it was still funny. Like they still were able to balance.
That goes back, I think, to our very first question, though, is I think what I was, like it models well for the church that we need to show up for the times that we are in, even though we have built a space of comfort and joy in other spaces, right? We still know the story. Jake is still there. The people you love and care about are still there. You still recognize what is happening, and yet they have completely pivoted to meet the time. And the church hesitates to do so, but I think would be so much more effective if we did.
Absolutely. I think we would be more effective if we wrapped up today's, no, not more effective. Sorry, I just wanted to use your last one. We do want to be cognizant of the time and aware of what we are doing. Olivia See, thank you very much for coming on 201. This has been a great conversation, and we really appreciate you talk to us.
Thank you.
We have a final question. You kind of answered it. You can rephrase that answer that you want to do. Spiff asks it far better than I
just asked it, I think, more often, but that's fine. And Olivia, I hope you'll come on. I mean, back on, because am I dying to do an episode on the super Diana Taurasi commentary for Final Four, and the fact that y'all, as someone who was in marketing forever, tell me you are out of touch with what is happening in the world, but without telling me, by putting hashtag BTS as the hashtag for Bird and Stu's show, the weekend of the Grammys. Sorry, that was a very neat statement, but like, ooh, y'all, so funny. And I could talk to you about that for hours. It's delightful to see you. I have not seen you in years, but it's good to be here with you. Our final question, as you know, is what biblical theme, verse, book, character, chapter, whatever are you most reminded of in Brooklyn Nine-Nine?
So as I've said, I'm gonna from my ordination was Luke 6, and I think it goes with this. I think it goes well with Jake and Doug Judy in the sense of what we're called to do, and for those who have ears to listen and who want to listen, I guess is a better way to put it with that scripture. And you do, you got to love your enemies. You got to love those people who, and it's about, if I take care of you and you take care of me, what is there to gain in that, right? And so it's taking care of those who have nothing to offer back. And so I just think with Jake and Doug Judy, I think that is Luke 6 is, I think it connects, I hope.
Absolutely.
I like that a lot.
I do too.
I'm going to go with Holt and Wunsch. Captain Raymond Holt is the Apostle Paul. He is humorless. He has a husband.
Ding, ding, ding.
He likes classics, and that makes Peter Wunsch. And they are inexplicably just like all up in each other's face. And
I like it.
Yeah. Also,
my ding 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 was your Paul reference, because I feel like you haven't dropped a Corinthian reference.
I'm 2 Corinthians chapter 9 for those of you keeping track at home.
We need a button that just like says, it's like those old school, it's like, what did they say? It was like Corinthians. Like we just need it to like
buzzer.
like like a buzzer, like one of those old I don't know, one of those old buzzers. I'm old. Okay, my final answer, I thought about this, is I think the show as a whole is a beautiful metaphor for the Last Supper, in which you are called to come together, to care for one another, to feed each other with people that know your whole story, right? Like, so like some of them have gone to high school together, and some of them have just met each other, and you have those little spaces where maybe you had a really traumatic a case together, or maybe you're just best friends, or maybe you're enemies. But that you are called for a common purpose, to come together and care. And as we lead into Monday, Thursday is and always will be my very favorite service of the year, because I think it is the holy, most human one of them all, and really postures us in the space of how we are. It's like active gospel. And I feel like this is that to an extent, in which you have people from all walks of your life and just new to your life into that moment, sharing grace and sharing vision and connection together. So
it's awesome.
Hey, fantastic. Olivia See, thank you once again. Olivia See is the associate minister at Riverside Christian Church in Wichita, Kansas. We will be back next week. As always, dear Deuces, we do remind you that our show is sponsored by Jeff Wonrow Designs. You can get your stoles 15% off by using our promo code letters 2-on-1 numbers 15 at checkout. Don't actually put in the words letters or numbers, please. Write us if you have questions.
2-on-1-1-5.
2-on-1-1-5. Until next time, though, dear Deuces, I'm your co-host, the Reverend Arthur Stewart.
I'm the Reverend Stephanie Kendall.
I am the Reverend.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, you are. And we will see you next time. Thanks for joining us on 2-on-1. Get more 2-on-1 at 2on1project.com.